Today's going to be a special day, folks. We're going to talk about the Pioneer. I've told you guys for 15, 20 years about this device. It's still the same photocatalytic device. We'll explain that. Chris Chase is here, and then I had a Facebook question that I want Chris to address. Also, I'm going to do a little bit teaching today about obesity and fungus. What makes bread rise? Could that same yeast be making us rise? Dr. Greg Emerson, all the way from Brisbane, Australia. I love this guy. He's talking about mitochondria. What is the mitochondria? I'll have him discuss that. Of course, Jenny's going to be here with her segment. Folks, it's important that you understand this information is brand new to many of you and totally new to doctors. Thank you for joining us here today. Today's Know the Cause is brought to you by Pioneer, better air for your home. My name is Doug Kaufman. For the past 40 years, I've dedicated my life and even my career to finding the root cause of disease. Join me in a team of physicians, pharmacists, and scientists, and soon you too will know the cause. A couple of years ago, we live in kind of East Texas. A couple of years ago, there was a tornado that blew through right off a highway here. And do you know, Chris, they still have some of the junk, some of the pieces of houses and so forth stacked up, and they have big tractors. This is a couple of years. They've kind of leveled everything off, fixed, tore down most of that stuff. But I'm told in Florida and in Houston and in other areas, we're forgetting about Louisiana and all the other people affected by this, they still have debris from those floods, the torrential downpours and so forth. Were you guys affected in Atlanta at all? We didn't get much.
We got 2 or 3 days of pretty good rains, but, and 30, 40 mile an hour wind gusts.
Nothing like those people saw. I mean, torrential
I had more
flooding.
trouble in the spring. They had a I don't know whether it was a tornado or a wind shear, but I lost 32 trees, big trees, oak trees.
Yeah, I know your property, yeah.
And
with a tornado, what happened?
It came through. I mean, Lisa and I were at the house, and we were getting ready to go out, and all of a sudden, it got dark, and
Did the dogs let you know in advance? I mean,
we got one dog that he's better than a weatherman. I mean, he nails it. When there's a storm coming, Hoppy will let you know.
Now these people, God bless them, Chris, they're going back into these homes. I would, to salvage the pictures, the stuff you have in that home, clothing that might be usable, et cetera, and they're walking into bacteria and mold. I think of them so often. I'm blessed. I've got 3 of these in my home. I've got 1 in my office. I'm a very fortunate guy. Clean air was that important to me. As a guy who studied mycology and mold, clean air was really important to me. And so I went ahead and did what I thought was right for my home and my office. Many people don't know about this technology. So if you're brand new to this, folks, this is what we call a photocatalytic device. It doesn't blow out anything. There's no air pushing it out. There's no sound to this. You can't hear a thing. That light source is coated, and it makes negative ions. When you're standing on the beach, those waves are rolling in. You inhale, you feel so good. There's a reason for that. Negative ions are being created. Positive ions are the bad guys, right, Chris?
Absolutely. And, we were talking earlier about the aftermath of some of these disasters and that sort of thing, and whether the average person is capable of cleaning their home post-event, or whether they need to get a professional and that sort of thing. And one of the things that I think you need to consider is the professionals in those areas are just overwhelmed. So it may be months, maybe as long as a year before you can get a professional in. Do you know the term triage?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know it well. I'm a Vietnam guy.
Well, look at the Pioneer as the first step in a triage situation where you introduce this technology to your home or your working space and that sort of thing while you're waiting for the professionals to get in there and do the jam up cleanup that needs to really be done. But in the meantime, you're helping to protect yourself from the mold spores, the bacteria that you're inhaling, that on top of you having a financial disaster, you end up with a health disaster as well. So just a thought.
So electricity is often a problem as you go back in, but they put those electrical poles I saw in some of the neighborhoods and you plug into an extension cord. That's a great idea. Mold spores are invisible. You can walk in and see black mold growing up the side of your home. Folks, some of you weren't in the flood. Some of you are looking right now at the ducting in your ceiling going, wow, what are all those threads coming out? It might be Stachybotrys, might be penicillium, it might be another mold, but this would benefit you also. Where I would place one of these units, if I could only have one, I would place it in my bedroom. I know I spend a third of my life in my bedroom. And if I wake up in the morning like this, or and you're spitting and spitting, think mold in your house, okay? When we get back, we had a fascinating question from someone that watches us on Facebook directed to you, and that is, gee, I don't know if my doctor really buys all this. How do you approach something like that? So we'll ask you that question. Don't go away. Today we're talking with Chris Chase, the president of a company called Pioneer. You know, Chris, you and Lisa would be fascinated by this. I do a show a couple times a week, 1 hour live, so people can communicate with me. I thought on television there's no communication. You can't talk to the host of a show. So I've done this, and the questions that come in prove one thing to me, the brilliance of this audience. People are magnetically attracted to this show, I think because of its name. Hey, I want to know why my ear is ringing. I want to know why my shoulder is sore. But they're one of us. We had someone write in, Christine, I think was her name, and here's what she wrote in, and we thought we got to direct this to Chris. Christine, there it is. I heard a medical doctor claim airborne mold does not cause skin problems. My first thought was what brought me to Dallas from Los Angeles 30 years ago was a dermatologist, a skin doctor. And what I proved to him in the years we worked together unequivocally, inhaling mold can cause dermal or skin reactions. So what's your take on that?
Well, I guess my first reaction is does the doctor know what causes skin problems? And if he does, why didn't he fix it?
I think, Chris, I can kind of answer that based on all the dermatologists I work with. They never think that a fork or a spoon can create it or that inhaling mold in a home could create it.
So if chemicals cause or can cause skin problems, there's a technology that actually treats chemicals. You know, our technology, the way that it treats chemical odors that you inhale is a chemical or an odor is a molecule that's made up of a combination of several different elements, base elements. And what the technology does is it attaches itself to the molecule and it breaks a molecular chain down into your base element. So it doesn't mask the chemical, it actually eliminates the chemical. Same thing would happen with the technology being exposed to your skin. It would help improve the underlying cause of your skin problem.
Chris, I and my wife enjoy really good health. You know, for an old guy, I feel better than I did 30 years ago because I've studied the cause. You know, why as we age do we wake up with hip problems and headaches and depression and so forth? I've had your units for 15 years in my home. We love them. We pull out this replacement bulb, throw it away, and buy a new replacement bulb. What's the replacement bulb cost? $100 or something?
It depends on the
size of it. Yeah,
right.
Something like that. And every year I put a new one in. It's quiet. You plug it in. I enjoy, and my wife enjoys, such great health. Do you get any questions on the little bit of ozone that is created by photocatalytic technology?
We have people that call in that are concerned about that. The level of ozone that this technology produces is about equivalent to the amount of ozone you're exposed when you go outside on a sunny day. It is in the case of Mother Nature, she uses that level of ozone to help treat outdoor air pollutant. So the same thing can be said of the indoor, but the ozone is not the base part of this technology. It is the photocatalytic reaction that really treats all three major categories of air pollutants. I would say to the average person that the ozone levels that come from this technology are nothing for you to be concerned with.
Yeah, and I'm living proof. We have a 750 square foot and two 1,500, probably overkill, but two 1,500 square feet units in our house. So they make a 350, a 750, and a 1,500. And the light source depends, you get if you have a 350 square foot bedroom, bathroom, set it in there. If your living room, dining room, kitchen is 750 square feet, put it in there. If your home is 1,500 square feet, put one of them in.
One of the things that I'll bet that you've noticed over the years is you almost never have a cold or a flu or whatever, because this technology keeps the level of bacteria and fungal infections low.
I am one healthy guy, and as you know, Chris, I am one fun guy. Thanks for coming in today. Hi to Lisa for me. Good to see you. Pioneer technology.
Pleasure.
Okay, coming up, the 3 M's in cancer research: mitochondria, mushrooms, and marijuana. Okay, Dr. Greg Emerson is going to talk about one of those, the mitochondria within our cell, and explain that to you. Before that, Nurse Jenny Herbacek with Cancer Connection has a tip for you. Here it is.
Hi, I'm Jenny Herbacek with the Cancer Connection. When you take a shower in the morning, do you enjoy that hot, steamy water? You might want to rethink that if you don't have a good filtration system on your bath and shower water. You see, our skin is our largest organ and it's very absorbent. Studies have found that you can absorb as much chlorine in one shower as you can by drinking 8 glasses of municipal tap water. The municipal systems can filter out about half of the prescription drugs and other contaminants, many of which can contribute to cancer. So the longer you shower, the greater your risk and your exposure. So the tip of the day is to take a short shower. And if you're not washing your hair, you can probably get the job done in about a minute. And if you're washing your hair, turn off the water in between when you lather up and when you rinse. For Know the Cause, I'm Jenny Herbacek.
Dr. Greg Emerson and I are going to discuss something that we all have a whole bunch of, right? Okay, you're thinking IQ, teeth, brain cells.
Charisma.
Mitochondria. Dr. Emerson comes all the way from Brisbane, Australia. He has jumped in the waters of Lake Wanaka in New Zealand. I mean, the ice melts in the mountains, comes down to this
snow
lake.
meltwater.
I can't believe you do that. But I want to talk, rather than that, I want to talk about this mitochondria. Everywhere I turn today, Dr. Christine Salter just gave a 3-hour lecture in Tucson to a group of doctors about this little tiny minuscule thing in your cells called mitochondria. Not much attention. It's kind of the powerhouse, the battery of our cells, if you will. When that's down, you're asleep, right? So how do you stimulate mitochondria? First of all, what is it, Dr. Emerson?
It's such a fascinating area. I just love the study of the mitochondria. And basically, mitochondria, several billion years ago were bacteria, which got into our cells and became a win-win situation. They had a home, and we got a lot more energy. And they're basically 2 membranes, an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And what happens is that they produce our energy, which is ATP. And to do that, they're basically reversing photosynthesis. So the tree takes the sun, carbon dioxide, and water and light and converts it into food and oxygen. And what the mitochondria do is they reverse that process. They take food in combination with thyroid hormone, insulin, and oxygen, and they produce ATP. Now, here's the really fascinating thing to understand is that you get electrons from the food, but you also get electrons from the sun and the ground, which is why those are both so important for us. You absolutely must get oxygen for that process to happen properly. And then what happens, the critical thing to understand is the main fatty acid involved in getting electrons into the mitochondria to use in the electron transport chain is DHA from seafood, which is why seafood is such a critical part of our diet and has been for so long. So it gives us the healthy fats, gives us the healthy proteins, gives us the DHA to let electrons into the mitochondria. The electrons pass along the inner membrane of the mitochondria through the cytochrome system, and as they do, they pump positively charged protons into the gap between the membranes. When that gap fills up with protons, they burst back through into the matrix, the water in the middle of the mitochondria, and that bursting the protons through there drives the production of ATP. So what do you need for great energy? You want optimal thyroid, you want lots of oxygen, you want optimally functioning insulin, you want energy, electrons from good healthy foods, the sun and the ground, and you want the DHA from seafood to allow all that into the mitochondria to produce your ATP.
But that's not who we are. Today we are fast food. We live a sedentary lifestyle. That's the most exercise most of us get. We are bombarded with stress from the time we wake up in the morning. What effect, is that why we are energyless? Is that why we are fast asleep? When he says ATP, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, the battery in the mitochondria, that which gives you energy, we're not making it. We don't ground, we don't take our shoes off and walk in the grass. You know, people don't do that. And yet you're saying, you're right, Doug, and that's why we're sick.
And the two biggest toxins probably that we get poisoned, our mitochondria get sick from, are mold and the abnormal electromagnetic frequencies that we are all exposed to. Not only are we exposed to these abnormal electromagnetic frequencies which impair the function of the mitochondria, but also starving ourselves of what the mitochondria really need, which is the infrared light and the ultraviolet light, which is why I now, part of this stuff, and you and I are going to talk about some of my routines, but some of my routines are now to get up in the morning and watch the sunrise, watch the sunset at night, because then I'm getting the infrared light, and the Nobel Prize winner has just won the prize for his work with the circadian rhythm of the cells. Infrared light in the morning switches off my melatonin, switches on my energy hormones. Infrared light at night tells my cells to shut down the energy hormones and increase my melatonin. We're missing out on that because we're sitting in our houses in this electromagnetic frequency firestorm on our computers or TV, getting all this blue light into our mitochondria, which is turning them off, not on.
Yeah, Dr. Emerson, why does it take someone to come from the other side of the world to teach us all this, folks? One of the reasons I love him is because I've known him for a decade. We stay up with each other, me on this side of the world, him on that side of the world. And it's interesting how sick they are in Australia. Only beaten by us here in America with sickness, right? Thank you so much, Dr. Emerson, for coming in. Look for him on our shows. We did a podcast I think you'll love. Really appreciate you. I really do.
Thanks for having me back.
I'll be right back with more. You know, the year was what, 1987, 1988. I worked with Dr. Weekly out of Medical City, Dallas for a few years. He was a skin doctor. He brought me in to see if this fungus business, as he called it, could have something to do with urticaria, hives, right? Itchy skin, everything, you know, from one skin disaster to another. And in fact, I proved it to him. How'd I do that? I asked him if he would write antifungal prescriptions for a couple of weeks, and I put him on a diet. Folks, they came back with their skin much better, but you know what they told me? Their belt. Their waist, you know, was becoming looser and looser and looser. They were having to tighten their belt. So people are losing weight. Do you think gut fungi could play a role in overweight or obesity? This is kind of fascinating. Just go with me here. This is a big organization, the American Society of Microbiology, circa October of 2017. Look what it says. Could fungi play a role in obesity? This was actually the headline. It says, fungi have recently been shown to affect gut, and that's a big word, but to you and me it means swelling, right? Anytime you see inflammation, it means swelling. What makes bread swell? Thank you, good, yeast. Could that same yeast in our guts cause us to swell? Under normal circumstances, the terrain doesn't work that way. You have good bacteria and good yeast in your belly when you were born, right? And they live symbiotically, they get along well. Along came in the late 1940s, early 1950s, something called poison. Antibiotics, thank God they came along. A lot of people's lives have been spared. In tiny doses, they kill tiny organisms, but they kill the good organisms too, leaving the yeast to take over. Now the yeast can go into full hyphal form, right? Poke a hole through the lining of the intestine, In goes the milk, out it leaks. Your doctor says, hey, you're allergic to milk. And by the way, do you notice yourself bloating? You're getting heavier and heavier and heavier. Folks, it just doesn't make sense to a physician who learned this from a medical school, a credible medical school, that antibiotics are important. Give them to people. And they began abusing that right to prescribe antibiotics. And more antibiotics we took. Look, do you ever watch Turner Classic videos? You know, these old 1930s, 1940s. See how many obese people you see. The banker is always obese, and the doctor, interestingly, tends to be obese. Everybody else is rail thin. Look at the old movies. They're all rail thin. That was before antibiotics. Now, in the 1950s, after 10 years of taking antibiotics in the 1960s, we started to see overweight actors and actresses. Here's the take-home message. Antibiotics played a role, but so does alcohol. You see, antibiotics and alcohol are actually mycotoxins, fungal metabolites. They're poisons in tiny doses. I don't think having a glass of red wine hurts anybody if they don't have a serious disease. I think it's the 2 a day that doctors say might be recommended. Of course they'd say that. Be careful with alcohol, be careful with antibiotics, be careful with mycotoxins. This organization is the American Society of Microbiology, right? But there's another organization very much like that. They're called the American Academy of Microbiology. Look what they said just 10 years ago. Fungi are the cause of many outbreaks of disease, but are mostly ignored. Enter yawn. Fungi can cause a number of life-threatening diseases. They are so correct on that. Many people, our doctors among them, our scientists, are largely unaware. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to be aware. I want you to know that the more we're exposed to mycotoxins in the air duct in our home, to mycotoxins in corn or grains that we're eating, the more sugar we put in our body that feeds the fungus, the more we gain weight. It can lead to obesity, and with obesity comes so many diseases. You just have to be careful out there. I'm glad you now know this.
If you're anything like me, you're happy there's a grain-free spaghetti available for all those days when we might have a pasta craving. I love spaghetti squash and will make it so many different types of ways when I have just one on hand. I'll do the classic spaghetti and tomato sauce, but add some crushed red pepper and maybe even some wilted greens. I'll make a casserole and use the spaghetti squash strings as the noodles for my layers. And I'll even make a grain-free hot breakfast like an alternative to oatmeal by adding some sliced figs, pecans, and a drizzle of organic maple syrup or honey. Sounds crazy, but all the slightly sweet, nutty flavor is delicious in so many different ways. The only thing I don't like about a spaghetti squash is how hard it is to cut into. I feel like I'm gonna slice off a finger every time I try to get through one of those bad boys raw. But there's a solution. You can actually roast the entire thing whole in the oven, then just slice it when it's soft and keep all of your fingers intact. Just pierce the outside with a knife a few times going around the vegetable, then put it on a pan and roast it in your oven at 375 degrees for an hour to an hour and 15 minutes until you can easily pierce it with a fork, then you know it's done. Then just slice it down the middle, remove the seeds, pull the strings out with a fork, and you've got it. Phew, I feel much better about buying one of those at the grocery store now.
Listen, what do you hear right now? You don't hear a thing. It's the Pioneer running. Isn't that pretty? Perfect night light in the hallway outside your bedroom. Friends, this is what Chris was talking about, right? The Pioneer. Just call that toll-free telephone number, talk to them. They're educated in this area. Chris has had this company 20 years. Man, they know what they're doing. I love these things. What did you think about today's show? Fungus and obesity. How do you feel about that? Thank you, Nurse Jenny, for coming in and talking to us. Thank you, Dr. Greg Emerson, Brisbane, Australia. He comes in here every year to continue our education, mostly about fungus. Yet another doctor who gets it. God bless you guys. Live Facebook, Know the Cause, Facebook, every Tuesday and Thursday, 3 p.m. See you next time. Bye-bye.